We haven't eaten a lot of those yet.
Say again?
Yeah. Maybe I'm talking about. It's all the same source, right? Easy way to get there. Yeah. We had some problems with one across the street. It's like, this problem, just recently, like, it's not less than us. It's not much. It's winter. I better find some more sheets.
Oh, thank you. No, I used to be able to. Say it was from an inner ear infection as an adult. And yeah, it's got some scar tissue and it screwed it up.
Really?
Yeah.
Hey, good.
I'll start a second sign-in sheet over here. Just make sure you're on one or the other. And then this support opposition neutral, this mostly matters for the order we call people to testify. So that's what that's for. Fill that out.
Oh, I thought. Okay. And she the lawyer?
I guess I did it right. I hope so.
Hearings Officer Westmeyer, we're signing people in, so we're going to wait a minute to start.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you for letting me know.
And then I'll sign.
I guess you don't have to. I got it.
I've got a third sign-in sheet. That's one I can use it.
And so for these ones, there's a switch to turn them on, and that's the same switch that increases the volume, and then there's a headset with them. Yeah, let me know if you have any questions. And then when you turn it on, you roll this up.
That's the volume.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, and so it goes up pretty loud, so you just want to go up slowly, please. And so now it's on. It's on.
Hi. Just, I guess you plug it in first. How do you do this? Somebody said they forgot their hearing aid and something. What's him?
Yeah. You forgot your hearing. And then you'll plug the earphones in here.
So what is this coming off of?
It's the microphone feeds in from here, so you'll essentially want to hold it towards the front of the room. That you'll want to sort of hold forward.
So this is on, or?
And then rolling it up.
Okay, there we go.
I can hear.
Little thing go over.
Before we before we jump into this, quick show of hands, who plans on testifying tonight? And Hearings Officer Westmeyer, for your benefit, there was about 13 or 14 people that raised their hands in the room here.
There should be some on Zoom too.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Stewart, are we ready to begin?
We are.
Okay. Let's do that then. We'll go on the record. It is 6:08 p.m. on April 12th, 2023. And this is a hearing for Deschutes County Final Number 247-22-000-497-NUV. It is a application for a non-conforming use verification to determine whether a variety of commercial and industrial uses were lawfully established on the property. My name is Laura Westmeyer. I'm the hearings officer for this matter. We're holding this hearing in a hybrid fashion, in part through electronic means. And I'm going to turn things over to Ms. Stewart to describe how that process is going to work.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Audrey Stewart, and I'm an associate planner with community development. The item before the hearings officer is a non-conforming use verification to determine whether a number of commercial and industrial uses were lawfully established on the property located at 21280 Tumalo Place. I'll begin the hearing by explaining how the hearing will be conducted and how members of the public can testify. Then I'll turn the hearing over to Hearings Officer Westmeyer for her hearing instructions. I'll follow with my oral staff report. The applicant will make its presentation, and then the public will be invited to testify. The applicant will be given an opportunity to present any rebuttal testimony, and lastly, staff will be afforded an opportunity to make any closing comments. Tonight's hearing will have a hybrid format allowing for both in-person and remote participation. The order for testimony will be as follows. First, the applicant will present their evidence, and then those in support will be asked to testify. Next, those in opposition, and then anyone neutral to the applicant's request. And lastly, the applicant can present rebuttal testimony if desired. Staff recommends establishing time limits for public testimony, but will defer to the hearings officer. Staff recommends 45 minutes for the applicant's presentation, 5 minutes for each public comment, and 10 minutes for the applicant's rebuttal testimony. Before starting your testimony, everyone will be asked to provide your first and last name and your mailing address. The hearings officer will prompt you if you forget, but the county needs this information before you start your testimony. For everyone joining us in person and wanting to testify, staff will ask interested persons to raise their hand, and then staff will call up each person one by one for their testimony. Please come up to this table here and be sure to speak into the microphone to ensure your testimony is picked up by the audio system. Also, staff asks that you write your name and contact information on the sign-in sheet. For those attending using Zoom, there are 2 categories of participants: attendees and panelists. Currently, everyone except the hearings officer and county staff are attendees. As an attendee, your audio and video are not recorded. When your status changes to a panelist, your microphone and video will be active for everyone to hear and see you. This is an important distinction because anyone wishing to testify via Zoom will be promoted to a panelist so that your audio and video can be recorded. For those joining us via Zoom using a computer, there will be multiple times during tonight's hearing that the hearings officer or staff will ask you to use the raise hand feature to communicate with staff. This feature is available for attendees and panelists and can be found in the center right of your screen or device. You will need to click the raise hand button when prompted. If a large number of people have their hands raised, we ask you to keep your hand raised until you're promoted to panelist or asked to put your hand down. Once you're promoted to a panelist, you'll see a button for your microphone in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. If you press this button, you'll mute or unmute your microphone. I point this out because during your testimony, you may want to confer with your legal counsel or your client. You can use this button to mute your microphone so that your conversation is not recorded. To the right of the microphone button is one for video. By pressing on this button, you can black out your video. Again, during your testimony, you may want to confer with your legal counsel or your client. Using the video button will allow you to black out your video if you desire. For those joining us via Zoom that have called in by phone, there will be multiple times during tonight's hearing that the hearings officer or staff will ask you to use the raise hand feature to communicate with staff. This feature is available for attendees and panelists and requires you to dial *9 on your keypad. When prompted to raise your hand, you'll need to dial *9 on your keypad. Once you are promoted to a panelist, you can mute or unmute your microphone by dialing *6 on your keypad. In addition to oral testimony, you may want to submit written testimony at tonight's hearing. If you are in person, please submit your written testimony to me prior to beginning your testimony. If you are participating remotely, please submit your written testimony via email. My email address is audrey.stewart@deschutes.org. Should the county's internet connection be interrupted, we'll attempt to get back online as soon as possible. If this happens, please give us a couple of minutes to reactivate the public hearing before you attempt to link or call back in. If your own connection gets interrupted, please attempt to join back using the same link or phone number you used initially. Hearings Officer Westmeyer and staff are responsible for conducting an orderly hearing. Any testimony or behavior which is inappropriate will be addressed and may result in that member of the public being removed from the hearing. Are there any objections to the format of the hearing or the proposed time limits for public testimony? If you're attending remotely and have an objection, please use the raise hand function, and if you're in the room, please raise your hand. Hearings officer, I see none in the room. And we don't have any on Zoom. Seeing none, I will turn the hearing over to Hearings Officer Westmeyer.
Thank you, Ms. Stewart. As Ms. Stewart described, we're following the normal ordinary land use hearings procedure in the county's code, and I will provide sufficient opportunity for everyone to participate at the appropriate time that she outlined. I'd ask for your patience to make sure we get through all of the steps in the hearing tonight. If you are planning to testify today, then please, before you begin your testimony, state your first and last name for the record so we have it on the on the oral record and also spell your name. This application is being considered through a quasi-judicial process. I'm only going to be considering the factual evidence that is in the record coming into this hearing and that you present tonight. My job here is to apply the law to those facts as you present them with the applicable provisions of the county's comprehensive plan and land use regulations. The standards and applicable criteria that are relevant to the hearing were identified in the public notice and the staff report that announced this hearing. They're set forth there and posted on the county's website. They're also available directly from Ms. Stewart upon request. It is important that you direct your testimony to the applicable standards and criteria. If you believe a criterion applies that was not listed, you may address the unlisted criterion and explain why you believe it applies. And please do so with specificity so that other participants may respond, and that I can address that in my decision. You should know that the failure to raise an issue with enough detail to enable me or other participants may preclude your ability to appeal that issue to the Land Use Board of Appeals. And the failure to raise a constitutional or other issue relating to any proposed condition of approval with enough detail to allow me to respond to the issue in my decision would preclude an action for damages in circuit court. I am a neutral third-party hearings officer for this matter, and in that role, I'm required to disclose any conflicts of interest or ex parte contacts. I have a contract with the county to serve in this role, and I'm obligated to remain impartial. I don't represent the county's interests or the interests of any participant at this hearing. And I have no relationship with the applicant. I'm not aware of any connections that I may have to any other participant in the proceeding that would affect my ability to conduct the hearing and remain impartial. I have communicated with staff only to discuss the particulars of today's hearing, the administrative aspect of the hearing and not the substance of the application. And I have no other ex parte contacts to disclose. Given the amount of people that were signed up to testify and no objections to imposing the time limits that the county has recommended, I'm going to go ahead and put those limits on today so we can have an efficient and timely hearing. In the order of proceeding, we're going to first, I will turn it over to staff to present the staff report from the county, and then the applicant will have 45 minutes to present the application. Those in favor of the application, other than the applicant, will then be able to testify. I'm going to ask that you limit your testimony to 5 minutes per testimony for all of those who testify. After those in favor of the application testify, I'll ask for those who are opposed to present their comments and testimony, and then those who are neutral to the application to present any comments and testimony that they may have. The applicant will have an opportunity to rebut anything, and I'll use the county's recommended time limit for that, which was 10 minutes for rebuttal testimony. And then staff, there will be an opportunity for staff comments or questions if I have any before closing the hearing. Before we begin, does anyone wish to challenge my ability to conduct the hearing on this matter or the county's jurisdiction to hear this case?
Hearings Officer Westmeyer, we don't have any hands raised.
Thank you, Ms. Stewart. Hearing none, you may proceed with the staff report.
Thank you, Hearings Officer. Before we jump into testimony, I'll provide some background on the application before us today. The subject property is approximately 29 acres, and it's located north of Bend at the intersection of Highway 97 and Tumalo Place. This property has 2 base zones, rural commercial and multiple use agricultural. There's one permanent building on the property, which is located in that southeast corner of the property. Right now, the subject property contains several businesses related to well drilling, logging, trucking, and other uses, which I'll go into more detail about on the following slide. The location and characteristics of these commercial and industrial uses
are closely related and sometimes overlap, which makes it challenging to identify the location and extent of each individual use. The diagram on this slide was provided by the applicant in their application materials, and it shows the approximate location of different uses on the property. According to the application materials, the existing building, which is that one in the southeast corner of the property, contains a dwelling as well as an office. This building was most recently approved for use as the office of a landscaping business through Deschutes County File SP0528. This building was later the subject of a declaratory ruling, which was filed DR 10-3, which found it was not a permanent dwelling. The applicant has requested verification of a nonconforming use for a determination that the existing commercial and industrial uses were lawfully established. According to the submitted application materials, the following 6 uses are subject to verification. The first is a logging and trucking business, including contractor trucks and heavy equipment for trucking, logging, and excavation for use by the applicants and for sale. This also includes the repair, maintenance, service, storage, and sales of farm equipment, vehicles, buses, parts, and trucks. The second use is welding, fabrication, and alteration of trucking, logging, excavation, and drilling equipment. Third is the storing, hauling, and selling of excavation materials, as well as sorting of rocks. The fourth is a well drilling business, and this includes storing trucks, pipes, rigs, and supplies on the subject property. The fifth is the storage, processing, and recycling of masonry and concrete materials. And last is a custom logging business, which includes processing and selling wood chips, firewood, and fence posts. The applicant has submitted a number of materials in support of this request, and these are all available in the public record, which I've included a link to on this slide. As I outlined in the staff report, it's unclear to staff if each of these uses were lawfully established and if each have continued without interruption or abandonment. Staff requests the hearings officer make findings specific to these issue areas, which were outlined in the staff report. The first is demonstrating that each of the 6 uses was lawfully established. The second is demonstrating whether there's been a change in the nature and extent of any of these uses. Third is, are any of these verified nonconforming uses occurring within that existing building in the southeast corner of the property, which is referred to in materials as the pink building? And last, how do these lawful nonconforming uses overlap with prior land use approvals, such as the landscaping business that received approval through file SP0528? That is the end of the staff presentation, and with that, I'll open it up to any questions from the hearings officer.
I do have a couple of questions, but I think I'm going to save it for later on in the hearing and first hear from the applicant.
Okay.
So at this time, is the applicant here and represented by, and are they represented by counsel?
They are here. They're not represented by counsel.
Okay. At this time, I'll ask the applicant to come up, state your full name and spell your name for the record, and then go ahead and provide your application.
Okay. Good evening, hearings officer. My name is Pat Cleaver. My last name is spelled Kliewer. I live at 60465 Sunridge Drive in Bend, 97702. And I've signed in. I'm the planner for the applicants, and I just want to say that I'm really privileged to be a planner for these applicants. These are, I don't usually say this, but they are fine people. They're really responsive people, and the fact that you have a room full of people like this, you would automatically assume there's got to be some opposition here. No way. These people have so many friends and family that are supporting them, And they're all asking the same question, why are we doing this? You know, you guys have been there forever. Everything that's going on now has been going on forever, so why are we even here? But we definitely want to help you get this approval. Let's get this done. Let's get this behind you. Everybody you're seeing here, everybody on Zoom is in favor of this application. So I just wanted to say a few things because I want this hearing to be more about them than about me. I have an unusually long application before you. Usually the non-conforming use applications are about 5 to 15 pages long. And I'm sure you've dealt with them before, but they're pretty cut and dry. There's very few criteria, just like the staff said. You know, what is the use that's going on? You know, describe it. How long has it been going on? Have there been any times when it stopped for a year or more? And is this use really, you know, a long-term use? So a lot of times in planning, we have really long, complicated criteria, and you have to address all of them. But in this case, you don't. So yesterday, I sent Audrey Stewart, the planner, a LUBA case that I use a lot when I'm dealing with non-conforming uses. It's from 2005, and I think it's very instructive and explanatory, and I'm sure you already know it, but I thought, well, if you hadn't seen it, that you would like to do it. You know, take a good look at this. In the application, I have an astounding number of photos. There's 92 photos. And there's a lot of ways to prove that someone deserves to have a non-conforming use. And one of them is photos. And in this case, I met the Fagens in 2008 when their neighbor saw them drive up into the property, and they asked me if I had met the Fagens, and I said no. And so we walked over there, and I happened to have my camera on, and I asked them if I could take some pictures, and I did. And so I put those in the application, and there's about 20 pictures that were taken more than 10 years ago of the whole property, and then there's all these other pictures of what it looks like now. And you can see that with photographic evidence that they do meet the criteria of having the same activities going on now that were going on then. In the application, there's a big section on history, and it goes way back to the beginning when this was part of the plat of Centralo in 1911, and that believe it or not, even though it was platted Centralo by the judges in Crook County, because we were Crook County then, it was never called that. It was always called Deschutes, and that's why we call it Deschutes Junction and that kind of thing. It was named after the Deschutes Ranch that was there. So why did I do that? Well, because of how this got started. People are like, why in the world are you even doing this? Because this is at one of the major intersections in Deschutes County, and it's on the edge. It's on the southeast edge of a shield, S-H-I-E-L-D, shield volcano called Long Butte. And you can see Long Butte from Redmond, you can see Long Butte from Bend, you can see it way from the eastern parts of the county. And so it's pretty much of a landmark. And this property, the 29 acres, are on that corner. There's a 71-foot drop in elevation from the top of their property to the bottom of their property. It's literally on the side of the shield volcano. And if you don't live in Central Oregon, you might not know what a shield volcano is. But a shield volcano is actually identical to the ones in Hawaii you've seen on OPB and stuff. But what it does is you have liquid basalt that comes up from the ground and gets to the surface, and it just flows out. And eventually it dries and flows out some more, and it builds up. So they're not terribly tall, but they can cover a mile in each direction. So you have rock, and that's why this isn't a resource area, it's not an agricultural area. So back in 1911, the railroad came here. It's an eighth of a mile to the east of the site. In 1937, US 97, the Dallas, California highway, was built that took part of, actually this property at that point was a larger property and the highway went right through it. And then the Fagens had to sell part of their parcel in 1992 to ODOT to widen that highway to 4 lanes like it is today. But in 1908, the G.W. Horner Road followed where Tumlo Place is today. And that was like a major highway back then. Of course, it was dirt. But that was also approved as a public road in 1908 by the Crook County judges. So you had the largest number of roads in the entire county coming together there by 1937 in every direction. And we had the county surveyor draw up the map of all the roads and say that, quote to us. And so in 1935 or so, ODOT started building their new highway. And a man named George Allison was on that crew. And in the application, I have a whole section about the Allisons because he foresaw the need for essentially like a modern highway convenience center there. And he bought that property a couple months after the highway opened, and it was just gravel then. It was a 2-lane gravel road. And he put in a gas station, a Shell gas station. He put in the Deschutes Junction Cafe. He put in a big garage, and it had a mechanics bay in it. They sold tires there, they sold batteries there, all that stuff. And that is the original way that parcel started to get developed differently than their surrounding parcels. So I think, anyway, so as we get up into the 21st century, more and more people who work for the county are coming from other areas. When we moved here in '98, there were 25,000 people in Bend. Now there's over 100,000. So you're getting all these new people, and you're hiring them, but they do not have any idea of the history or what happened before they arrived. And code enforcement people were just showing up at the Fagens like all the time. They were going on their property all the time. And it became very, very uncomfortable. These are fine, fine people. They're good citizens. If somebody in authority shows up, you want to do something to help them out. And it was just constant. So finally, I started hearing all of the information about this, and I wondered if I could help. And finally, in about 2016, a bunch of the neighbors ganged up on me and said, Pat, you've got to help them. So I had been a planner with Deschutes County for 7 or 8 years, and I knew a lot of the older people. I didn't know all the new people for sure. And I called them up on the phone and said, what's going on with the Fagens, and I looked at all the code enforcement cases that were online, and they were seriously like, well, you're doing logging there. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, I've already researched, because of the jobs that I was doing, I had already researched the area and that property, and I already knew that the logging literally went back to the Allisons in 1939, and that every owner either did it or they leased out land for it since 1939. I said, well, why would this be a code enforcement thing? And then when I started looking at the other ones, they were equally what I could only call stupid. These are not proper things to be doing with public time and public money. And so when I talked to Jacob Ripper, who was a principal planner at the time, he said, Pat, do you have any proof of all this stuff you're telling us? And so I started emailing him some of the photos that are in the application. And he was just astounded. He said, I had no idea. And so then I met with one of the code enforcement technicians and the planner, and we decided that the best thing to do would be to do a non-conforming use application. And they asked me if I would put all the history in it and all the photos in it, so that as new code enforcement people and new planners were hired, they could look at it and they could learn not only about this property, but the surrounding properties as well. So that's why we're here tonight. And I have to admit that I really love hard, difficult applications. I'm known for them. And I have to admit that I do very well with them. And this one, I said I had never done a non-conforming use application. So the planner gave me a copy of 4 applications, and he said they're all administrative declaratory rulings. You know, they're no big deal. You know, you can have this done in about a month after you apply. And I'm like, okay. So here we are years later. So we applied before, and a wonderful planner, Matt Martin, was assigned. And at the end of about 4 months, he called me up and said he had accepted a job as the planning manager of the City of Sisters, and he hadn't finished my application. What did I want to do? So in talking through it, we decided to withdraw the application and start over with a new planner and give them plenty of time to process it. So last summer, last June, we applied again. And very quickly, Audrey sent me an incomplete letter, which asked me for more information, which I provided to her. We took the opportunity to provide a lot of letters from people, because like we talked about evidence, you have photographic evidence and you have, you know, people evidence. And so we got 11 letters and submitted them. And just so you look in the staff report, it says that there were no letters submitted from the public. And Ms. Stewart explained how the planning department now handles that. And if I, as an applicant's representative, turn these letters in that are written to you and written to the county commissioners and signed, that those are not considered individual letters. She can correct me if I get this wrong, but it's only if they email you or they bring the letters in that they get counted as parties of record. I'm going to look into that further with DLCD, but that's how they do it. So that's why she ended up with no public letters, but she had 11 public letters at that point. And so I emailed some of them to her again yesterday to make sure they got into the record. And 2 of the 3 that were handwritten, I typed. And those 2 of those people are here tonight, and and I've turned in the newly signed typed letters for them. So other thing in the staff report I wanted to correct, the staff talks about declaratory ruling 10-3, and that she uses that as evidence that the house is not a house. Well, I researched that house from the very beginning when it was built by the Allisons, and it is a house. It has always been a house, and it is still rented out. And what makes it a little harder for the county is I was at that meeting for the declaratory ruling, as was Eugene Carsey, as were the Fagens, as were all the people that lived out there. Jack Cole was there. And we were all very interested in this. And we all said one thing, including Gene, who had personally lived in the house. And he says, I just was renting this house. And all of it was ignored. In fact, my name isn't even on the list of people attending. And they came up with their conclusions, and I totally object to that conclusion and object to the conclusions that they came to about that house. Now, what's really stranger about that declaratory ruling is that there are it makes it sound like there might be one house, but that house was crossed off, so there's no houses in this area. Isn't that what you think, reading that? Guess what? There are 4,000 residents of Deschutes. 4,000. And there's over 2,000 homes in Deschutes. And what's interesting about this is most of those houses, well, not the houses, but most of the lots were platted prior to the first zoning code for the county. Most of the lots were done before 1978. And yet, that's the ruling they came up with. So I just want to say I know a lot about this. I really have researched this, and I'm respected for the quality of my research. And this declaratory ruling is so bogus that you can read it and know exactly who wanted it and why they wanted it, and there we are. So.
And Pat, I just wanted to jump in and let you know you have about 27 minutes just for pacing.
Okay, great. I'm almost done. So, I just want to wrap up. I can wrap up now and let everyone else, do what they came for, which is to support the Fagens and to tell you that what is going on now has been going on forever. Harry's brother Don started renting property from Eugene Carsey, who is the caretaker of the Balsheiser's property, and the Balsheiser section you definitely want to read. It reads like a drama. But anyway, that was the beginning of the Fagen juice. So we're not talking like 11 years ago. We're talking about 1960s, before planning even really was going on in this county. And then Harry started parking his logging trucks there, and he had an agreement also in the 70s, with Eugene Carsey. And I actually kind of foresaw this going, as I said, for quite a while, that we're going to have to solve this problem with code enforcement. And before Eugene died in 2019, I had him write a letter, which is in here, and just getting ready for this. And he said, the years that they started leasing this property. Then in 1990, the Fagens ended up buying it. And that was about the time that ODOT was negotiating with them to widen the highway to 4 lanes, and it took out the gas station, took out the restaurant, all that stuff. If I had been here to help them then, we probably would have ended up with a lot of that stuff being rebuilt too, but it's the way it goes. But since in 1998, I personally started living off of Tumlo Road, about a mile from their property, and I went beside it literally several times every day. And I worked in Redmond, so my kids were going into Bend, so we were back and forth, back and forth. And so I have a letter in here too, stating that what is going on there now was always there, as far as I can see. And I have been on that property, like I said, since 2008, taking pictures for a long time. And I can verify that everything going on there now has never had a break. And it's pretty much the same as it's always been. So that's all I want to say. Do you have any questions?
I have no questions.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Kluwer. At this time, I'm going to ask for any favor and any testimony in favor of the application, and we'll start with persons in the hearing room. Ms. Stewart, if you would be able to call them, I'm not sure if you had an order listed when people signed in, or if you could just call them by when they raise their hand.
Yeah, thank you, hearings officer. We will do a show of hands again for those in the room who would wish to testify in favor of the application. We've got. Okay, it looks like about 12 or 13. And then we will start sort of at the front of the room and work our way back. We've got a little crowd here. Are you okay starting? I'm fine. Okay. So when you testify, you will come up to the table here. And as a reminder, when you start your testimony, if you can say your name and your address, and that's just for the record.
My name is Lane Milo. My address is 64978 Valeview Drive, 97703. Can you hear me?
Spell your name as well. Thank you.
First name is Layne, last name M as in Mary, Ilowe.
Thank you.
I currently live just down the road from Harry's shop, and I have been a neighbor and have passed this property since 1996. I've known the Fagens since 1991. Have seen no change in activity or cancellation. It's always been there, and they've always been doing these businesses.
Thank you. Again, show of hands for those who wish to testify in favor. Okay. Would you, either of you, like to come up?
My name is Ron Miller. I live in Tumalo on Pinehurst Road. My brother-in-law and sister bought this property. I remember it from the very beginning. They have done an amazing job there. I drive past that property every day on my way to our ranch in Bryanville, and they are, I don't know how they can do it, but they just keep going. They do this, they do the same thing. Their businesses are great, and the property looks great.
Hey, Mr. Miller, would you spell your name for the record before you leave? Is it Miller?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And would you like to testify next?
Matt Mahoney, Mattmahoney, 22027 Rickard Road, Bend, Oregon, 97702. I'm on the younger end of everything here, but I can attest from growing up here in Bend and in that area that those operations have taken place out there since, I can't say the beginning of time, but I know that the zoning changed in 1979. I was born in 82. I can't attest for that stuff prior to that. But from growing up at the ages of 10, 11 and onward, I can remember log decks out there. I can remember excavation material out there. I can remember lots of trucks out there. We rode four-wheelers as kids on that property prior to Harry and Bev owning it. We are now logging and trucking contractors in town. We have used that facility. We have delivered materials to that facility. I can remember as a kid, riding in the trucks, parking trucks there, and that stuff dates back to mid-'80s at that point. So obviously it's been going on for a long time in there. The pictures that have been submitted, is pretty good proof as to what's been going on for a long time out there. It would be great to see them get the approval for non-conforming use. I know that as a business owner in Bend, we would be interested in continuing to use that and would honestly be interested in making some investment into the improvement of that area and that property, to expand it and to get some buildings up possibly if it could be used that way. And, you know, from an aesthetic standpoint from the highway, buildings that may hide a little bit of the parking, or, you know, some fencing that would facilitate that might help everybody from the, you know, outside looking in, so to speak. There has become an influx of housing in there. There's been an influx of people who didn't know that stuff has been going on there since the 30s, within the last 20 years driving by it. From that standpoint, it's the exact same mentality as the homeless problem that we have in Bend, and it's a simple fact that not my backyard. Everybody wants to do something about it, they just don't want it in our backyard. Everybody that drives by that property thinks, you know, that stuff probably needs parked somewhere, but they don't want it in their backyard. The unfortunate part of that is we have grandfather laws. As the saying goes, it's grandfathered in. That stuff's been there so long, it was there when you bought your house and moved into that. So unfortunately, you might have to get used to it a little bit. Like I said, if they could get a non-conforming use and some other businesses, which I know are in town, would be willing to step up, build some buildings, clean it up a little bit, it might look great for everybody. There's several industrial zoned areas right across the street, right across 97, and I don't think anybody's having any complaints about any of those places. So it'd be great to see them get approval on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Was there anyone in the next row?
Hello, my name is Ashley Dice, ASHLEYDICE, and my address is 65545 76th Street, Bend, Oregon, 97703. I'm a local business owner. I have a business in Bend. I'm a mom. Both my kids, one was born in Redmond, one was born in Bend, and for the past 12 years, I've lived at my address on 76th. I remember from the first time going to look at that house, recognizing that property. I feel like anyone who has lived here for any amount of time knows exactly where it is, what's been going on, and that it's looked the same for forever. Just to add a little onto it, I was explaining to my kids why I was coming here tonight, and they actually chuckled, and they were like, Mom, that's been like that our whole lives. So even children are able to see this, and so I'm just not really sure why they're getting picked on so much. I just hope that this goes through for them, because they're good people. And just to echo what everyone has said, it's kind of a staple in this town. Everyone knows that property. It's been the same as long as I've been here, 12 years this month. And I know people have a lot further back than that, but for sure for the past 12 years, I can say it's exactly the same as it's always been, and we're happy to have the Fagens there. Thank you.
You, Ms. Dice.
David Arntz, ARNTZ, mailing address, Post Office Box 1083, Bend, Oregon 97709. I first met Harry and Bev Fagen back in the early 80s, and for the next 20 years, I've been, for the most part, as an independent contractor, hauling logs for them in various places all over Oregon, delivering to all kinds of mills. And but then on occasion, probably a dozen times, we would go unload logs at Buffet Flats. I remember this specifically because we would use his rubber-tired loader, never unloaded logs before with a rubber tire loader. And then also another, just one more example of the use of the property. They needed somebody to drive a truck up to Camas, Washington, and so I did that for a few loads, hauled back Camas basalt boulders and dumped them on the property, and they were processed into masonry materials by Kevin Spencer Masonry, a local mason here in town. And that's two examples of the use of the property. My log hauling career ended in 2001, so all of that happened before 2001. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Starnes.
Hello, my name is Casey Beckman, Caseybeckman. Mailing address is 1900 Northeast 3rd Street, number 106-36. My residence is 65545 76th Street in Bend, Oregon 97703. I've lived in Bend, Oregon, or Redmond since '84. I've driven past the Fagen's property almost every single day, no matter what, for work or visiting. It's not just a property, it's a landmark. It's a place that we drove by when we were children and can remember. I remember before the overpass was there, seeing the road getting widened and going, oh man, there went the restaurant. Seeing the overpass go in and knowing that they probably lost a little bit of their property. It's not how it should be. That is a landmark that needs to stay how it is. It's been the same way ever since I can remember, coming up on 40 years now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beckman.
My name's Rick Dice, D-I-C-E. I live at 63790 Johnson Ranch Road, Bend, 97701. I've known Harry and Bev since the 80s. I've been driving by that property, utilizing it for storage, what Harry and Bev use it for, storage of logging equipment. It hasn't changed in at least the last 20-some years. They continue to use it for storage of equipment, logging equipment and other equipment. There's no change. I see no reason not to grant them their continued use that they probably need at this point. Thank you.
Thank you,
Was there
Mr.
anyone
Dice.
else on this side?
Good evening. My name is Tammy Baney, T-A-M-M-Y, B as in boy, A-N-E-Y. My address is 336 Northwest Congress Street in Bend, Oregon, 97703. Thank you for your time this evening. I have some prepared comments. I appreciate this opportunity to provide testimony regarding the request for a non-conforming use verification for the property located at 21280 Tumalo Place. As a fourth-generation Central Oregonian and having served as a Deschutes County Commissioner for 12 years, I am keenly aware of the unique land use patterns and uses in the Deschutes Junction area. Deschutes Junction has a long history of being a complex mix of past and present land use decisions, in addition to many activities that predate Oregon's land use program. It is important to note that the land in question is in an area that is surrounded by similar uses, removing the concern that by supporting the request for non-conforming use, it might create an incompatible use with surrounding properties. In addition, if a concern is precedent, the risk is minimal, if at all. The record clearly outlines a consistent pattern of use without disruption for over 50 years and by the same people, the Fagens. The comprehensive plan and county code in which we operate is established to protect the health and safety of the public and its residents. The request does not open the door for additional permits, uses, and activities. Rather, this important step recognizes a long-standing use, resolves current code enforcement actions, and removes the threat of further actions. It gives certainty for the county and the Fagens and provides a reasonable and logical outcome to a 53-year journey. Thank you.
Thank you. Was there anyone else on this side of the room? Moving on.
My name's Neil, N-E-I-L, Fagen's last name, F-A-G-E-N. Address 53 Northwest Tumalo Avenue, Bend, 97703. My parents bought this property when I was about 6 years old. I've been on the property probably every month for the past 30 years, on and off at some point. Growing up, I learned how to repair trucks, welding, fabrication. Just yesterday, I had to go down and find a bolt out of a rear end that I needed. So I've been there, learned how to operate trucks, loaders, self-loaders. I've hauled logs on and off. I've hauled dirt on and off. I've hauled rocks on and off the property. Pretty much been a staple of my childhood and into my life. Currently manage and own and operate Aiken Well Drilling since 2014. Aiken Well Drilling had been on the property prior to that since 2003. We use the property for storage of our well casing, drill bits, all things used in the well drilling industry. And I'm just here to say that these activities have been taking place for 20 plus years, even further in my case, going back. So I feel that the non-conforming use verification is, highly supported by myself in all 6 applications, because I've been part of most all of those. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fagen.
Can I see a show of hands again for those who would like to testify in favor?
My name is Ted Walbillig, W-A-L-D-B-I-L-L-I-G, address 1868 Southwest 25th Street, Redmond, Oregon, 97756. So me and my wife moved down here 26 years ago from Portland. I've known Harry and Bev all my life. And I mean, as far as I can remember, there's always been log decks out there. There's always been equipment out there. And we own a construction excavation company, and I actually use their property for training and for people to learn and get the experience on the machines that they need, because it's just a great area for that. That property has always been what it is today and never has ever really changed. Hopefully it'll stay that way, where they can keep using it, and certain of us that live down here have that opportunity to still use it and be able to take advantage of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Doug Aiken, 2851 Northwest 95th Street, Redmond, Oregon. Been here since 1960. I started up Aiken Well Drilling in 95 and kept it to 2003 and sold out to Jim Thompson, which rented land there where it's in question up until Harry Fagen bought the business. And from 1960 clear up till today, it looks the same to me as it always did. And I hope that Harry and Bev get the approval that they're asking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Aiken.
My name is Randall Reinhardt. Randall, R-A-N-D-A-L, Reinhardt, R-E-I-N-H-A-R-T. I live at 19441 Paiute Circle, Bend, Oregon. I've known the Fagens for over 30 years. I'm an excavation contractor too, and I have hauled since the 90s. I have hauled dirt, rock in and out, equipment in and out. I've parked stuff for sale there before. In 2008, I worked on the wood processor with Harry and there on the firewood. I've lived in Bend my whole life, so even when I was a kid, I remember Deschutes Junction being Deschutes Junction. It was always about the same as it is today. I don't think a lot of things have changed. I'm for the approval for getting her done. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further testimony and support?
There is. There's about 3 or 4 more people.
Okay.
My name is Carl Cromwell, C-R-O-M-W-E-L. I'm on 21066 Tumalo Road. I worked for Harry since '89, retired from Aiken Welding. And all the time I worked for him, we moved logs in and out, we moved dirt in and out, we worked on trucks and equipment, parked equipment there. I see no reason why they don't get this land grant thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Tyler Mahoney, M-A-H-O-N-E-Y, residence 22095 Neff Road, Bend, Oregon 97701. I'm a nephew to Harry and Bev. The property in question here is where I learned to drive a log truck in the early 2000s, which has turned out to be great because in the logging industry still now. That property has been very useful to lots of people in the county throughout the whole span that they have owned it, and prior to that, for the exact use that it's in. There's materials there that were stored that was, Harry let me have some of that stuff when I bought my property to build my driveway and use as road base. I remember, as a kid, that was always a cool place to go. If we weren't, able to go in the woods and see what was happening there, we could go out there and see the logging equipment. And as a young person that's in that mind, that was like going to Disneyland compared to, kids that want to go to Disneyland for us. I remember through the youth group, Harry would donate wood. We'd go out there. There was always wood there, log decks. We'd help cut up wood and, give it to the needy through the youth groups. And I'm obviously in favor that they get the motion goes in their favor. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe we had a couple more people from back here. Okay.
Hello there. My name is Rick Havern, R-I-C-K-H-A-V-E-R-N. I have a cabinet company here in town that I've been running for quite some time. I have the privilege of meeting Harry and Bev in, I believe it was 2010. And I met them actually, there was a car for sale on the property that we're talking about. And I am honored to know these people. They're fantastic people. And as long as I've known, the property does appear the same, and it is. I have to agree with the gentleman prior to me. It is fun going up there. You always find something new, and it's like, not necessarily new, it just, you just discover it. It's like, wow, this is kind of interesting. Anyway, I hope this whole motion goes through, and have a good evening. Thank you.
Javern.
And I believe this is our last person in the room, correct? Okay.
Hello, my name is Rich Michelson, Michelson. Harry and Bev is my aunt and uncle, and I've pretty much spent my entire life out there working with the Fagens and doing stuff, and the property's always been the same, and the Fagens are doing a great service by allowing all these other contractors and friends to use their property, and so, I don't know, it's always been the same, and they're just fantastic people. I think that's about it.
Thank you. I'm just going to double check show of hands. Would anyone else in the room like to testify in favor? Would you like to? It looks like we have one gentleman here. Yeah, come on.
I'm the culprit, Harry Fagen, 53 Northwest Tumalo Avenue, Bend, Oregon, 97703. I'm the culprit, and I want to thank both you for missing your supper to hear this hearing, okay? And what I've heard is they're not pulling your leg. I think we're up front, and I thank you very much.
Okay. I believe we have no one else in the room who would like to testify in support. Okay. Hearings officer, there are no hands raised.
Okay, Mr. What about online? Anybody online who wishes to testify in support?
There is one person online who would like to testify in support.
Are you able to elevate them and put them on off mute?
Correct. Our producer is elevating them now.
It looks like Mr. Cooch?
Couch.
Mr. Couch, would you please state your name and spell your last name for the record?
Yeah, Kaiser Couch, Kizercouch.
Okay.
Address 21735 Coyote Drive, Bend, Oregon 97702. Yeah, so thank you for hearing me. We've been family friends with the Fagens for the last 15 to 20 years. We've had a family business in Bend while we were living in Redmond, so driving by the property for about 30 years. And I agree with what everybody else is bringing up, that the property has remained the same and and been used the same for the last 30 years that I'm aware of. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if there is no one else online or in the room in favor of the application, I'll ask now for anyone who may be opposed to the application to raise your hand in the room if you want to speak in opposition.
I'm going to double check. I see no one in person who wants to support in opposition. No one in person has raised their hands, hearing officer, and no one on Zoom has either.
Okay. Does anyone wish to testify as a neutral comments to the application?
Hearings officer, no one has raised their hands in person, and we don't have anyone on Zoom who's raised their hands either.
Okay, thank you. Well, now is the time for rebuttal. There's no opposition, so there's not necessarily any reason to rebuttal, but Ms. Kluwer or for the Fagens, if they wish to provide anything in addition, you may do so at this time.
This is Pat Cleaver again. Just wanted to let you know that since there is no opposition, and since I've written probably more than I had to in this case at this point, I think that our side would like to have the record closed tonight and just be done with this.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Stewart from the county. Is there any comment or any opposition to closing the record at the close of the hearing?
No comments regarding closing the record at this time.
Okay. So my only comment is from Ms. Stewart in the staff report and recommendation. There were certain conditions of approval that were recommended if the non-conforming use is determined to exist. And under the non-conforming use section of the county code, looks like I'm not able to impose any conditions of approval for non-conforming uses or initial non-conforming use applications. So I'd love to hear you speak to that. I was looking at chapter 18.120.010, subsection G5. An approval of a verification of a non-conforming use shall not be conditioned. An approval shall be sufficiently detailed to describe the allowed parameters of the verified use. If you have any comment on that.
I do. I'm pulling up that section right now.
Okay.
The conditions that were sort of included as recommended ones are pretty boilerplate ones that have been used before. Staff has no objections to removing them, though.
Okay.
And then one thing I do want to note is condition C, that prior to any alteration of a verified non-conforming use, the owner shall secure land use approval. This is something that will apply even if it's not listed as a condition. And so this is one sort of to make it clear, moving forward, both for property owners, future property owners, future staff, that's normally listed just to clarify that any alterations do need to go through land use review. But again, that would apply regardless of whether it's listed as a condition.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Stewart. Does the applicant have any response to that?
I'm not getting any objections from the applicant.
Okay, well, seeing that the record is now closed and this hearing is adjourned, I'll issue a written decision and submit it to all parties. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.